Hey everyone, Eric Watson here, freelance writer, player of games, writer of boards, recorder of videos, and tabletop role-playing aficionado. Welcome to another D&D Beyond review, my written and video review series. Take a look at the adventures and supplemental material at dndbeyond.com. With this video, I'll be reviewing the free introductory adventure Peril in Pinebrook, designed by Shawn Merwin for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. If you enjoy the content, consider using my affiliate links for online shopping and supporting me via patreon.com/Rogue Watson. So every once in a while I do pull up D&D Beyond and look and see what's on the tap, which is kind of limited right now, but hopefully we'll be expanding. And Peril in Pinebrook is a free first level adventure, very much designed for bare bones D&D introduction. Now, when I say bare bones, I mean we get like 2 pages of rules. You really start stripping it down. In fact, I can just imagine like the boardroom meeting where they take like the starter set, Dragon of Icespire Peak and Lost Mine of Fendover, and they say, okay, and they start ripping pages out and be like, all right, we don't need this, we don't need this, we don't need this. What is like the basic bare bones thing we need to make a D&D adventure actually work? So in this case, I think I think it works out pretty well. The rules have been trimmed down to basically include, I'll go and switch to my PDF window, have been trimmed down to feature just the D20 as your main dice using to do everything, and then your D8 or sorry your D6 to do combat with, and that's it. You only have those 2 dice. They explain the attack rolls, the difficulty challenge, so skill checks, and then like the advantage disadvantage system, hit points, and armor class. And that's about it, I think, for the entire rule set. And then there's some notes for the DM and for overall like gameplay experience as you try and learn like basic good practices, listening to your players, and if you want to use voices and get creative and make sure not to let your players run all over you, but also don't, tell them just flat out no on all the things, like, kind of just basic helpful tips that newcomers aren't really gonna know all this, and it's even more so for DMs to try to learn all that. So it's a linear series of adventures, but again, we're aimed at very young. I don't really know what young mean. I mean, everybody's got different ages, and kids all mature and age at different rates. So I have a 11-year-old, almost 12-year-old, and a 3-year-old. So one of those is very D&D capable. The other one is basically a goblin child. And the answer may surprise no. And I think the older one would definitely enjoy all of this and be able to play this version very, very easily. And then even maybe graduate to something like, Lost Mine or something after that. So for this to be like literally your first experience playing D&D, I think it's overall a positive. And then for a DM, this is even designed to be kind of a new start for the DM as well, which is even trickier. If the DM is new, that adds a whole nother layer of challenge. I think pedagogy is literally the art of like not the art, but the method of teaching, like how you teach others. Because when a DM has to learn something, when a book has to teach the DM then has to turn around and teach others, right? And it's hard to teach people how to teach. Ask any teacher about this as they've learned it. And it's something you learn with your own methods, and it's something you have to study and work towards and gain with experience. So you're going to kind of suck at first, but hopefully this book can get you started. And one thing I really like that it does is even in the like read aloud text, it will feature things that you're supposed to read aloud. For example, the very first thing that happens, you're on a trail, you've got kind of an NPC guide with you, and you're just kind of doing a patrol around the town of Pinebrook in the northern part of the world. And it even says, you're going to make a perception check to see if you can hear what Captain Cole hears. Perception's listed on your character sheet under skills. Like, it literally tells you what to say as the DM who is running this game for your crowd of new players. That's a pretty good plus, I think. That's because again, it's hard. It's one thing to teach players how to play the game, but you have to teach the DM how to teach the players how to play the game. And so you're all kind of in it together. Now, hopefully your DM's not brand new, but if they are, and if you're watching this and you're thinking like, okay, this is something I could maybe start with or something I could run for younger kids, I absolutely think it is. You may not even need all that much information for you, the DM, but for you to be able to impart that information on your younger players, it's a huge plus. It is basically just a linear series of encounters, but I think it does a good job of kind of masking that to where it feels like you're going on this kind of epic little, not epic journey, but the whole thing is like 15 pages, right? And that includes the introduction and like the character sheets and all that. It's very, very tiny. This is not Dragon of Ice Fire Peak or Lost Mine of Fendover. It's not a big, 40 or 50 page book that includes a town and multiple things. This is just a series of encounters that you can play within an hour to an hour and a half, depending on how, rowdy your group is or what kind of shenanigans they get up to. The first encounter is that you meet a baby dragon, a baby silver dragon, thankfully. They were not going to end this adventure early by coming across one of the less desirable types of dragons. A baby silver dragon, and that's adorable. That's awesome. If you want to get kids invested in an RPG, you give them animal companions, talking animals, baby animals, whatever you can do. And unless they're psychopaths, that's one good way to like filter out the crazy kids, is the ones that aren't gonna think this is awesome. They're the ones that want to like kick it or something. No, that kid needs a talking to. But for most of the audience, they're going to really enjoy having this companion around. It's adorable, and you even get this cool appendix sheet, which is useful in one of the later puzzles of translations for Draconic. And I think a fun DM could even have a cool way of having like baby dragon talk and have players like look up and see what they're trying to say and communicate. Like, that's awesome. And you're also introducing that exotic element of a fantasy world in a very easy space, right? A dragon, everybody can conjure up what that means. A baby, everybody can conjure up what that means. And then how do you even communicate with this interesting creature, which can grow up to be such a powerful entity in this space? So that's the first encounter. Then your guide leaves, and you're on your own with your party, and you're given your mission, which is to deliver this poor lost baby back to the Dragon's Lair cave, which is conveniently not too far from here, I guess. So the next encounter, you get to the entrance of the ice cave, and we have our first combat encounter. You fight a bunch of living icicles, which kind of remind me of maybe like ice methods or something. But again, everything has been super stripped down. You can literally see the stat block here for the enemy. The only things it has is armor class, which is just the number that you need to hit when you roll your attack, hit points, which is how much damage it can take, and then its attack, which includes its modifier that it can add when it attacks with a d20, and then the amount of damage it does, which everything, only 2 dice, remember, everything's either a d20 or a d6, so all damage rolls are d6s, and all attack rolls and skill checks are going to be d20s, which is normal. I am kind of disappointed that we didn't include additional dice. I think that's a really fun thing to introduce to kids, especially. That's something unique in an RPG, especially if kids have even played board games before. The D6 is so, ubiquitous when it comes to gaming. Everybody's kind of seen a D6. It's fine. People like dice, but I think what makes playing RPGs a lot more unique, especially like D&D, is all the different cool polyhedral math rocks that you get in those boxes. And that's something I always got really interested in when I looked at it when I was younger, as having all these different dice. And yes, the D20 is of course really cool and has all the sides and is the main symbol of D&D and a lot of RPGs. But I don't think it would have hurt to include some D4s, some D8s, and have maybe some other cool feature, that could, even if it was just one character, rolling one kind of ability. I just picture everybody like leaning forward and seeing that dice. And so I think that's kind of a missed opportunity to not actually include those dice and include those abilities, but I get why they'd want to keep it as simple as possible. No initiative being rolled, by the way, which to me is a very good thing also. I think that's one of the trickier elements, is having to keep, for the DM, having to keep track of initiative with multiple characters, and enemies are, by design supposed to be grouped into one. We roll with roll 20 that we can even kind of divide enemies into different initiative orders, but that's a challenging thing I'm not sure I'd want to do in an actual tabletop setting. In this case, you just have all the characters go, and I think you just take turns around the table. You literally don't even care about there's no dexterity. There's no okay, you go, you go, you go, you go. Just whatever you sat at the table. And then the enemies go, and then players go again. Again, we're keeping it simple, and I think that works pretty well. Also, we hadn't even taught players how to really make attacks or take turns until we get to this point. Also a good method, you talk about pedagogy, where we're not info dumping a bunch of stuff at our young players right at the beginning. We want to get them into the game as quickly as possible so that they are rolling dice and playing the game as quickly as possible, and then they can start asking questions about how to do things, and then the DM is there to answer. And in this case, obviously, what you want to do is read this whole document first if you're the DM, and then you'll realize, okay, but I'm going to teach the players throughout this entire adventure and not just all at the beginning. I'm going to cover some basic stuff at the beginning, make sure they've got, their character sheets in hand and kind of know like, hey, we'll be starting a conversation and just kind of going back and forth about what's going on. But then once we get into other areas like not skill challenges, that's a whole other thing. Any skill check opportunities and then combat, I'll be teaching you how to do that stuff. So we defeat our living icicles. There are opportunities to heal, but there are no resting mechanics here. Instead, the character sheets actually say on there, hey, for like the fighter, once per this adventure, you can heal up to this amount. And then for like the wizard, it's like twice per this adventure, you can blast off your magic missiles, and they do exactly this. You have like one special ability. It's almost feels very 4th edition to me. I don't know very much about 4th edition, only like hearsay and conjecture, basically. I didn't start doing deep dive into D&D, and I basically skipped all of 4th edition. But to me, it reminds me of kind of like the surges and the per encounter abilities. It's kind of the methodology they're using to like teach kids how to play D&D in this case. And we'll take a look at the character sheets in a second too. I think they're pretty cool. From there, we do a series of encounters of non-combat encounters, so more like environmental hazards. This is an interesting way to do it. Basically, instead of giving the players a map and letting them explore the space and then having the DM tell you things, instead, it's almost more like an overland travel where the DM is just describing different hazards and the players have to react to them. I prefer the former versus the latter. I prefer, in other words, dungeon crawls versus travel encounters, even though I've done plenty of travel encounters, for that very reason, because I think it gives the players more control and allows them to feel like they're exploring more and, choosing their own path and those things. That being said, I do think this is probably ultimately the right call for new players, is to be able to treat it very linearly and instead have the DM describe different hazards that they are going through, and then they can respond accordingly to that. Unfortunately, it also means this does not come with any kind of map system. There's no movement involved. There's no grid map when it comes to like battles. Instead, everybody's at whatever range they need to be to make things happen. I guess range attacks, you don't really care about whether you have advantage or disadvantage there. It does mention the advantage disadvantage system to the DM, and it kind of there's one sidebar I can't say I'm too much of a fan of. It says basically, if things go south, you can cheat, which is running exciting combat D&D is like a thrilling amusement park ride. The players often want to be scared and excited, but they don't want the excitement to lead to certain character death. This is where you can perform storytelling and mathematical magic. I think I understand the spirit of what they're trying to say here, especially when it comes to a younger audience. But I think this may be putting the DM on the wrong path. And I'm somebody who definitely tries to do everything I can to not, kill my player characters and make sure they do have a good time while still threading that very close razor wire to having the tense and exciting moments, but not actually tipping over into like frustration. And that's a really hard thing to do that DMs spend our entire, careers working on, basically. That being said, there are things you can do to turn things in the player's favor. I don't know about this one, which is, for instance, you can give characters advantage on attack rolls or give monsters disadvantage on attack rolls. Changing probabilities like this can improve characters' odds in defeating monsters. Rather than having a monster attack one character if they fall unconscious, have the monster attack a different character each turn. This tactic keeps more characters in the fight longer. You can even say the baby dragon rushed in and took down a monster, but try not to use outside help very often. So if you've watched my campaigns, I have probably done all of these things to help when things go really south. And it's in a situation where maybe it's my fault for balancing things like I did, and not necessarily a fault of the players because of bad rolls or bad decision making. I think that's a big part of it. That's a lot to put on a new DM. I would probably say, in my advice, like the easiest thing the DM can do is fudge hit points. I would never recommend fudging rolls if you can help it, but if you can fudge hit points, in other words, if it feels, and it's not even really for combat related, but like if there's one thing left and everybody's like missing it left and right, and finally one person attacks it and it still has one hit point left, but like like we're ready to move on, like just have it get killed, right? Like don't be that much of a stickler for it in those kind of situations. But that's kind of advanced DM advice anyway, and I don't know. I guess I don't want the DM tip to be like, hey, feel free to fudge things to make sure everybody has a good time. But I also get that these are younger players, and you definitely don't want to beat up on And in other words, tell the DM, don't have all your living icicles go after like one person until they're down, and the other person, don't play them like tactically, like ready to really kill people, because that's not what you're needing to be doing right now. The This section of linear environmental hazards, you've got some ice walls you need to climb up. You can take damage if you don't make the check. There is some ice slides that appear, and you have to, again, make a skill check, or you take damage by falling. I think you get 2 chances. You can make a investigation or perception check of a DC 10, and if you fail that, you get another chance to make a DC 15 acrobatics or athletics check to avoid to take damage, which is essentially a saving throw at that point. Like, everybody gets to make the check, and if you fail the check, then you have to make the saving throw, but in this case, it's actually acrobatics or athletics. So on the one hand, they don't teach you how to do saves or what that means. But on the other hand, they basically have saving throws. They just treat them as skill checks. I can see why they did that here, but I also think that saving throws is kind of one of those fundamental things you really do need to teach people. And I don't think it's that much more confusing. Essentially, a saving throw is the same thing as a skill check, but it has, just a different modifier section to it with its own modifier list. And then, hey, whenever somebody asks for a save, then you have to just roll that one thing and then apply that modifier to. It's the same thing as a skill check and attack roll. Basically, it's just it's a third area that you'd have to add. So I'm somewhat annoyed we didn't have that, even though we still did a saving throw type situation. I do love the ice mirror puzzle where you've got the Bahamut, the god of good dragons, comes on and says, "What kind of creature are you carrying?" And he speaks in, I guess he speaks in common, but you're supposed to reply in, you understand the words that dragon speaks, even though it isn't a language you know. You're supposed to reply in a draconic, which is why I use that appendix, and you're supposed to say silver dragon, which combines 2 different words. That's a really cool puzzle, and plus you essentially gave the players the answer key, and then they can look it up. That is a good way to do an easy puzzle, and easy puzzles are a good thing to fall back on because it makes your players feel really good. Even though it feels kind of dumbed down and easy for you, the DM, players love puzzles that they can be like, all right, cool, we got this done, we can move on. Right? Like, how often do you feel really good about getting puzzles done in a video game versus getting stumped on a puzzle for a long time? Like, the difference is immeasurable in terms of frustration level. So thumbs up to the simple but elegant puzzle there. And then finally we have a boss fight against 2 like froggy creatures. By the way, I'm a little annoyed. So this book is inspired by an upcoming book called The Practically Complete Guide to Dragons. And it has to do with dragons, obviously. But I assume all this artwork is only from that book, but we have no other artwork of anything else. And this is an official like D&D product, which should have pretty darn good art throughout. So on the one hand, like, yay, dragon art is cute. Obviously the silver dragon art here is great because that fits what's going on, but no art of any of these unique creatures that we have. These are like sentient ice frog people, and then we have those living icicles. Like, I think being able to show like your young kids a cool picture of the monsters would have gone a long way there. And obviously having a map would have been my preference, and adding a little bit of tactical grid to it. Of course, I love my tactics games and everything, so I would have added a little bit of movement and really gone that far into it. I think kids would be okay with that, but I can kind of see why they didn't. But at least maybe include some kind of map reference for DMs to look at, just for funsies, I don't know, or some kind of like map of the cave, like just anything other than just dragon art. I guess I was bummed that we didn't get anything more than that. The Egg Snatchers in this case are slightly stronger, AC of 12, hit 18 hit points, plus 4 to hit, and deal 1d6 plus 2 piercing damage. Now, if they solved the dragon puzzle, they do get the equivalent of a full heal, which is very nice. And then the fighter can heal themselves, and the cleric can heal anybody with their ability. And that's basically the end. The mama dragon swoops in. There's a fun conversation there where they can like, oh, hey, we actually saved the baby. We weren't kidnapping her. And there's an interesting tease for like a future adventure where she was actually off hunting one of her other missing eggs, which she wasn't able to recover. And while she was gone, that's when the other one hatched and wandered off. So it kind of teases, I guess, another adventure the players can do. Here's that appendix where it has all the words in there. And then here are the kind of cool little almost index card landscape character sheets here. I think they work really well. You've got your armor class, your basic attacks, including the hit and the damage, the skills, your special ability, which, twice during this adventure you can use magic missiles, or twice you can use cure wounds. The rogue is just every attack roll in the first round of combat. So I guess twice, it also effectively means twice during the adventure because there's 2 combat rounds. You can do your sneak attack and get an extra 2d6, and the fighter has a once per adventure regain 6 hit points. I love the way that they did descriptions also. Instead of leaving it open to do the like personality traits, bonds, and flaws, it's just, hey, here's 2 extreme options for each of these, halfling rogue, elf wizard, and then choose like one of those, and that's kind of your character. And a little spot to draw your character is always pretty fun too. So pretty solid reference sheet at the end. I think, for what it is, I think it does a fine job. I've got some complaints about it, but overall, I think this is actually a pretty fine example of we want a very, very simple, the simplest way to teach D&D, which I know there's a lot of folks looking for that, especially for, younger kids. You've got a whole generation of folks who grew up on D&D when they were kids, and now they've grown up and had kids of their own, and they want to teach it, pass on the funness to the next generation. And I think this is actually a pretty fine way to do it, especially if you feel that jumping into Lost Mine or Icespire Peak or one of those starter kit adventures would be a little too much at first. Especially in terms of the overall scope of the adventure. And if you're not even thinking like, how are they going to enjoy just sitting at a table playing for an hour and a half, which is the other big advice I have is with younger kids, keep it short. Like you want to end on a good note, and you want to have shorter sessions to where everybody feels good about what's going on. Don't think you're going to get a big 3-hour long session. People are just going to get bored. No matter how much fun that it's set up to be, it's just time span and attention span and all that is just not going to be in your favor, especially depending on the age of the kids. Obviously, if they're like 15, that's probably different. You can probably jump in with Lost Mine. But I think specifically for like, around 10 or younger than 10, you could definitely get this done as a pretty good introductory adventure. Let's go over my pros and cons for Peril in Pinebrook. Pro teaches basic rules and game flow in 3 pages, and then adding more as you play. Now, there's not a lot more you have to add. It's basically just how to do specifically examples of skill checks and combat. But I like the fact that it just teaches things very simply, keeps it basic, and then adds a few things as you go, and also includes like the read aloud text to help players in the actual sidebar. So it literally cuts into like, hey DM, here's what you need to read to then teach to your players, which is very nice. So it, in a way, this also is one of the better tools for teaching DMs to play D&D in addition to players. Pro, 4 easy to use half-page character sheets. If you have more than 4 players, whoops, sorry. There's only 4 here, but the 4 that are included here I think are very well done. They're in keeping with the much more simplified character sheet. They're just that one little half-page thing. They've got the most important information on there, and they even include little fun areas, draw your character, and then include, it like has a little prompts for description, so you can just choose one of those prompts versus having to come up with a bunch of stuff yourself. Very, very introductory again. Pro, linear series of encounters that still feels like a mini dungeon crawl and story. This literally is just a series of encounters, which is probably the weakest designed of adventure styles. And yet, I didn't necessarily feel like it was super weak. Obviously I'm giving it a lot of leeway because this is designed for younger players as a very beginning in D&D experience, but we meet our baby dragon, we've got our social encounter, we've got our guide at the beginning, then we've got a nice combat encounter at the entrance to our quote-unquote dungeon. You can make it feel like a Dungeons DM, and it's supposed to feel like a dungeon, but we're not really doing a dungeon crawl in my mind. We're just kind of doing another series of encounters, but at least it breaks up between, okay, now we've got to do, we've got to climb this cliff, and then we've got to have this talking dragon, we've got to answer for the puzzle, and then we got to navigate these ice slides, and then we've got our big climactic fight at the end. It breaks everything up in a really nice way. It feels like a dungeon crawl, even though it's really not. By the way, so many adventures in D&D have a lot of dungeons and like 1 or 0 dragons. This one has a lot of dragons and no real dungeons, which is kind of unique to me. And then Pro, I just wrote Baby Dragon because that's just a very, very clever way to instantly hook in your young gamers into any game, is give them a baby dragon to immediately befriend and love. And then at the end, by the way, the mother even gives her dragon. She's like, oh, and I guess it's just dragons are like, I don't know, not too maternal in that way, but she's like, go ahead and raise the dragon, like really likes you, and it's good to be around people and all that. So at the end, they even get the dragon ally. I do have some cons and criticisms. My one con is about like the art, surprisingly, a lack of maps, and the fact that all the art has to do with just kind of dragon stuff that you can tell is from the dragon book. And I think I was disappointed that we didn't get art, at least for the monsters that are in here, because they're not just standard like goblins and stuff. They're, living icicles and the froggy ice frog thing. I couldn't even understand what those things were. But give me art of that. Like, let the play, like, ooh, and you can show that creature up there instead of just describing. I don't know. Maybe I don't think that's asking for too much from the company that also has Magic the Gathering at their disposal and has all this like amazing art, artists and everything, and work with all these amazing artists. Like, you can include some things in there. I know it's a free adventure, but you gotta give me something. And then Con, I did actually have a bit of criticism. I don't think it teaches you quite enough. Again, I know it's introductory adventure for younger players, but we don't have saving throws, we don't have status effects, we don't have movement, and we don't have any kind of action system. So if you are going to teach your players with this, just know that when they then graduate to, Lost Mine of Fendover or something, you're going to have to teach kind of at least as much rules as you just taught. The spell system, for example, has not been really taught at all. I have mixed feelings about it, right? Like I still feel like even young ones could understand like basic movement, on a little battle map thing. And I think that would get people very excited about it. I guess you don't want to give people the wrong idea and think this isn't really a board game. It's an RPG, but I don't know. As somebody who loves board games and loves tactical video games, I really appreciate, and my players also, we really appreciate having that visual element. And that really draws us into the game. So to not even have that here at all is a bit of a bummer. And then not having the saving throw system feels important. Status effects, you could keep things very simple and just have a single, like, oh, you feel woozy or you're poisoned or something. Now you have disadvantage on your next things. Like, I think that, just you can keep it simple, but still have that element, I think is okay for people to keep track of, especially if they write on their sheet and everything. I would have liked to see just a little bit more into that. Final verdict, aimed at younger and brand new players, Peril and Pinebrook does a lot of things right while keeping the rules simple and fun. Thank you to everyone for watching this video review. You can see my written review at roguewanted.com. You can watch more reviews and follow our own D&D adventures here on my YouTube channel. And you can support my work at patreon.com/Rogue Watson. Shouts to Platinum patrons Joe, Will, Thomas, Dan, Brennan, Genocider, Eclectic, Roleplay Roll, Christopher Corey, Big Nut, John F., John L. Scott, Eric, Tyler, Nathan, Camp Crystal Lake Counselor, Andrew, Daryl, the Reldrin, Captain Woody 79, Stephanie, Andy, Patrick, Jason, and Ishmael. And gold patrons RPG Papercrafts, Pretty Boy, and Yuma, Dead Lizard Lounge, Sam, Lumpy Spuds, Jerome, Nathan, Fast Like a Tortoise, Scott, Rufus, Caroline, Jerry, Thomas, and Glenn. Thank you all very much for your support.